Ranking Member and Chair for their patience with those of us who have other responsibilities. I have 2 markups and 2 hearings going on at the same time this morning, and I really appreciate you all being here. I was here earlier to hear some of your back and forth, the questioning, and although I heard my colleague from Michigan claim that Michigan is the auto state, Ohio is really the auto state. In fact, we are the country's leading manufacturer of engines and transmissions, so maybe a fewer auto plants per se, but we are a huge auto state and a
Senator
huge
Portman,
auto
if I could interrupt you, I have to leave, but Senator Portman will take over, but I just want to thank you all for being here. This has been a stimulating hearing, and I think we're all pretty much in agreement in a lot of ways. And you're not wasting your time, so we're glad you're here. Senator Portman, if you'll forgive me, if you'll close this.
Of course. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I appreciate it.
And I think the Chairman makes a good point. I think there's actually some consensus building around what I consider the misuse of Section 232. It's meant for national security purposes. And again, for my state, it is particularly concerning that we might shift to autos. I do think that with regard to steel, you can make an argument that as to certain countries and certain products, there is a national security issue. I would say electrical steel is a good example of that, where we only have 1 factory left, and we have enormous increase, almost 100% increase in terms of electrical steel imports and where we need it for the grid. Autos is a different case. And I did listen again to some of the back and forth and read your testimony, and I think we have to be very careful here, particularly with regard to our allies, because national security is ultimately about us having a concern about enemies, not allies. Second, I am concerned that this course of action would actually make it harder to make a car in America. And that's my concern if it's not done. Mr. Nasser, you seem to be the most supportive of 232, but even you have said it needs to be very targeted and specific as to country, as to product, for that very reason. So the framers of 232 knew this might happen, by the way, and they were concerned that people would take 232, which is for national security, and use it for a broader purpose, what they viewed as protectionism. And I think that's kind of where we are today. The Ways and Means Chair at the time said, and I quote, "The national security exception is to protect and preserve the national security. That's its sole purpose, not intended to serve as a device to afford protection of those industries who might claim it." That was many years ago, back in the 60s, and it's only been used a couple times since in the 70s for oil. But I think this is an issue. There is legislation we've introduced called the Trade Security Act. Some of you have been involved with that. Trade Security Act is a bipartisan bill, and it's trying to make good on those words of that chair of the Ways and Means Committee. Let's focus on national security. So it says instead of 232, where you have the Commerce Department making a determination on national security, you vest it as phase 1 in the Department of Defense, where you have the expertise. And then with regard to the remedy, of course, you then turn back to Commerce. Second, it gives the Congress the chance, through a motion of disapproval, to actually weigh in. And I think those 2 things would make a huge difference. Mr. Shostak, you're familiar with the bill, I know, because Honda has endorsed it, and I guess you have more auto workers than any other company in Ohio. Can you speak briefly about the need for this kind of narrowing of that legislative, the 232 provision, so that it meets its original goals?
Yeah, thank you, Senator Portman, and good to see you again, and thank you for the kind words about operations in Ohio. Though a lot of those engines and transmissions are made by Honda workers in Ohio, as you well know that. I was listening intently because I know you have quite a bit of experience in this area, in the trade area, and I was trying to understand for myself the basis under 232 for how these tariffs could be applied. And honestly, it's probably over my head or above my pay grade. So I think any clarity that we can get in terms of that is very, very important, and why we endorsed your bill. Again, we're heavily invested in manufacturing. You know our R&D strength in Ohio, and we're really contributing significantly to the U.S. industrial base. I say that for Honda as a company, but I can say that for the entire auto industry. All 14 companies that are doing business and making product here in the United States are contributing to the industrial base. So we would appreciate some clarity on that as well. So thank you very much.
Mr. Hauge, you make a lot of stuff in Ohio too. It's more parts, and we appreciate your suppliers your companies in Ohio. Talk to us about what the cost of the car is going to be. We've heard a $2,000 increase on average for a domestically produced car. Car has over 30,000 parts, and they come from all over the world, don't they?
They do. Thank you, Senator. the price of steel has just, gone up, but you have to think a little bit too about the timing. Okay, so we've seen the tariffs come in, the prices go up, but then as contracts expire, we've only kind of really just started this. I think it's going to, cascade for, a long period of time until finally the auto companies have no choice but to take the price of a car up. And then when they do that, volumes will eventually come down because cars will not be affordable. I think one of the ironic things we see in our operations in Ohio are a good example is, we're having a very difficult time hiring people. One of the reasons we, did a hiring freeze is, just the uncertainty. But the other thing is that, we have, within the U.S. probably about 100 open jobs at the time when the tariffs hit, and a very difficult time hiring workers, okay? In our headquarters in Tennessee, as an example, we've had to set up our own school inside the plant. We have a full-time teacher, trainers, and a tool and apprenticeship program.
That's, I'm hearing it all over the state. Mr. Menendez needs to ask his questions now, but that's the topic of another hearing. But let's not make it worse by, adding to the cost of automobiles for consumers. And at a time when our economy is doing well, we need more workers. Let's focus on worker retraining and on better CTE and other skills training for younger people. So thank you all for being here, and I will now turn to Mr. Menendez.